Tonight, in the spirit of our debate, we have extended a special invitation to Dr. Elise Robinson, who is here to speak with us tonight. Elise Robinson completed her PhD in Theater and Performance Studies at the University of Georgia. A committed scholar of feminist activist performance, Dr. Robinson's research on the British women's suffrage movement demonstrates that the militant suffrage movement was fundamentally a performance movement and must be analyzed as such. Dr. Robinson is currently the program coordinator for the Institute of Women's Studies at the University of Georgia, where she also teaches both introductory and upper-level courses. Prior to her arrival at UGA, Dr. Robinson taught theater and performance at the college level for over 20 years at institutions across the United States. In addition to her scholarly work in theater and gender studies, Dr. Robinson has also directed over 30 productions and regularly speaks at regional and national conferences on feminist activist performance, neurodiversity, and queering the curriculum. Outside academia, Dr. Robinson is an avid novel reader, gardener, and amateur potter. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Robinson.
Madam President, members of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, and fellow guests, thank you so much for inviting me to participate this evening. I have never attended one of these events, and I have wanted to for a long time, and I think this is just fantastic. I'm very excited to talk to you about Rainbow Capitalism. What I'm going to do in just a really short few minutes of talking to you is just try to give you a little bit of historical context for Rainbow Capitalism, and also try to talk a little bit about making some distinctions in how we define it and the way that we use those terms. So Rainbow Capitalism is kind of an umbrella term for anything that has to do with the queer community and commerce, essentially. It is a recognition that the queer community has money to spend and that creating and marketing products and services to them is financially rewarding. That's basically what we're talking about when we're talking about rainbow capitalism. Some of the earliest examples of rainbow capitalism date from the late 1800s to the early 1900s, which is earlier than we might tend to think of that being a thing. Some of the reasons why it started in the late 1800s and early 1900s is because you also had industrialization happening at that same time period, which meant increasing urbanization. So it meant that people were moving from the country into larger urban centers, and because of that, they were largely leaving these smaller, more family-based communities, and that meant that people who were queer, and in all of that rainbow identity variety that there is in that term, who maybe could not have been comfortably queer or out queer in their home villages, could come to a bigger city where it was more anonymous and where they could collect themselves in neighborhoods or other smaller communities and be open with who they were, right? So it isn't until you get that urbanization and that industrialization that you get enough queer people living in community that they suddenly have some buying power. So in this early time period, most of the rainbow capitalism, if we're going to call it that, would be with things like gay bars, bathhouses, bookstores, and other sort of hyper-local businesses. So you're not talking about massive corporate or national campaigns. You're talking about, like, you know, this particular bar in this neighborhood really caters to the queer community because that's who lives in this neighborhood. Or this bookstore is really going to get in the sort of seditious pamphlets or the books or the novels that maybe are banned elsewhere because this is who lives in this neighborhood. The rise of fascism post-World War I really ramps up homophobia and dampens queer-centered consumerism. Fascism, pretty much wherever it springs up, is not queer friendly. You'll be astonished to learn. And so when that ramps up, the queer community needs to sort of go deep into hiding to stay safe. In the sort of 30s and 40s, and then into the 50s, you have something called the homophile movement, which is one of the first movements to sort of try to put a positive face on queerness for not queer people, right? It's one of the first gay-centered or queer-centered movements. It also, though, took the position that the way to make gays safer and queer communities safer was to be more like not queer people. And so it sort of was very much a site of tension within the queer community that is a tension that exists to the present day, right? Like, is it better to sort of be less in your face queer and therefore safer and maybe getting some of the privileges of not queer communities, or is it better to say, this is who I am, just get next to it and deal with the consequences of that. That still is an ongoing tension. So in 1958, discussion of homosexuality in literature and the press was legalized, which meant that suddenly those pamphlets and magazines and books that had been illegal and had to be sort of sold under the counter could suddenly be sold up front. So there was a concomitant rise of publications of this kind of stuff, of literature and fiction and nonfiction, magazines, news articles, all this kind of stuff suddenly starts happening a lot more in the late 50s. Then, of course, you have the Stonewall riots and the queer rights movement in the 60s and 70s, which really normalizes queer existence in a way that it hadn't been normalized before and brings a lot more interest from corporations. So it's in the late 60s and 70s that you really see the rise of the queer consumer as a sort of more influential force in regular sort of U.S. capitalist systems. The AIDS epidemic that started in the late 70s and then really came to its height in the 80s and early 90s did bring more stigma to the queer community, but it also raised a lot of awareness about the queer community. So in terms of sort of queer capitalism or rainbow capitalism, it was a much more visible community, and again, people wanted to sell them things and have them spend their money. And so as the queer community has become more visible and more accepted, their buying power has increased as they get better paying jobs, they have more cash to spend, and so rainbow capitalism has grown. So it sort of is a symbiotic relationship, right, between those two things. With increased globalization, rainbow capitalism in the West is also one way that queer acceptance can spread to communities where it was previously taboo, right? So thinking of the US and the sort of Western growing acceptance of queerness as being sort of like, the Instagram influencer of the globe, right? So that because our products and because being American, at least up till recently, has been pretty, like they want our fashion, they want our music, they want our stuff, we can also sort of, send out that queer acceptance as well via rainbow capitalism. So I want to distinguish rainbow capitalism, which is just this recognition that the queer community has money to spend and we can make services and products for them to buy, from rainbow washing. And rainbow washing is a specific kind of rainbow capitalism, and it's one that is extractive, performative, and exploitative. And so it goes along with greenwashing or whitewashing or pinkwashing or a lot of other these capitalist sort of things where large corporations typically want to sell a specific community something, and so they perform this allianceship with that community in order to extract their dollars and their labor, and not necessarily being sort of legitimately supportive of the community, but really just wanting their cash, right? So typically for rainbow washing, that would be centered around Pride Month or Pride celebrations, involving corporations or governments or institutions adopting queer flags, logos, or sayings for the month of June, commodifying pride through the creation of rainbow-themed products of all kinds. And some of these institutions will, represent queer inclusion during the month of June, but then not for the rest of the year. Some of them will make sort of donations, like maybe, 20% of the proceeds from the Pride merchandise will be donated to a queer or queer-friendly organization. But typically that's just a really, really tiny fractional percentage of the enormous profits that they're making from selling these things. So how effective that is, I don't know. And then there are also often these institutions and corporations are extracting this money and performing this allyship with the queer community, and at the same time engaging in terrible labor practices or, funding politicians who don't support the queer community, who actively want to erase it. So again, this tension, right? And it also has had the effect of shifting the focus of Pride celebrations from protest, which is what the Stonewall was a riot, so from protest and sort of trying to push back against problematic Western norms to sort of a celebration of the commodification of queer identities. So the thing that I want to end with is just to think about rainbow capitalism and specifically rainbow washing as really being representative of a very consistent theme throughout queer history, which is this tension between an assimilation/civil liberties approach to queer existence, right? Do we want to fight for queer people to have the same rights and the same, they can also marry, they can also rent apartments, they can, the same as normative cishet culture? Or do we want to take the liberation revolution approach, which is to say, this structure is harmful for us, tear it down and let's rebuild something new and better that includes more of us. And rainbow capitalism is reflective of this tension. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the debate.
We will now move into the primary program of the evening. I'd like to remind both members and guests discussion is 5 minutes per person, with the first speaker having 7 minutes. There may be no interruptions until after those 2 minutes. Questions are also out of order in the last 30 seconds. Guests are encouraged but not required to speak on resolutions and to ask questions. Sister First Assistant, would you please explain how a guest may take the floor?
Sister President, if I was a guest going to take the floor, I would stand and say, Madam President,
Ms. Guest.
may I have the floor? And then I would read the address on the lectern.
Sister First Assistant, would you please explain how a guest may ask a question?
Sister President, if I was a guest going to ask a question, I would stand and say, Madam President,
Ms. Guest.
question for the speaker.
Will the speaker yield?
At that time, the speaker will either yield or not yield. If they yield, you can ask a question. If they don't yield, just wait a little longer. They probably just have a little bit more of their speech to get through, and then you can ask again.
Sister Second Assistant, would you please explain the time signals?
As Second Assistant President Corey, my job is to keep time for tonight's debate. Since the speaker's back is turned towards me, I will flash the time signals to you, which you will reflect back to them. The time signals are as follows: 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, gavel.
Does the Query Committee have a resolution to present at this time?
Sister President.
Sister Bessa, may I have a argument?
Here.
Sister President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumna, and guests. In the late 90s, Subaru was in so much trouble. The cars were fine, but they were losing to their competitors. Nissan, Toyota, they were wrecking them. So Subaru, they needed a way to stand out. They did some market research. They tried to figure out what they could do to revive the brand. And what they found out is that lesbians love Subarus. Normally, a brand would shy away from this, but Subaru doubled down. They started running ads targeting their lesbian consumers. Subarus are entirely comfortable with their orientation. Talking about steering, of course. It's not a choice. It's the way they're built, with an image of a nice, sturdy-looking car. This was a major brand embracing rainbow capitalism, and it worked. Subaru was back from the brink, and other companies took notice. I'm sure you're all familiar with colorful pride merchandise flooding our favorite stores every June, but it's time we pause and we ask ourselves, what does it really mean when corporations slap a rainbow on their products? Is it genuine allyship or just another tool to sell us something? It is time we ask ourselves whether rainbow capitalism is helping or harming the queer community. With these questions in mind, I hereby submit the resolution. Be hereby resolved, capitalism is a net detriment to the LGBTQ plus community.
Will the clerk please reread the resolution?
Be it hereby resolved, rainbow capitalism is a net detriment to the LGBTQ community.
Second.
The definitions for tonight are as follows. Rainbow capitalism, the commercialization of LGBTQ plus identity, events and or customs by big corporations, is a net detriment, does more to harm than support the current interests of, to the LGBTQ plus community, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, and other sexual and gender minorities in the United States. I'm glad you all got to meet Brother Radford last week, because I'm about to invoke his spirit for you. Capitalism is and will always be inherently opposed, antithetical to queer liberation. In recent years, Phi Kappa has made the maybe necessary shift away from blaming every resolution's faults on capitalism, but in this case, it is necessary. And I challenge you all to seriously consider the core conflicting interests of the LGBTQ community and its pursuit of equal rights, incorporate queer advertising. Because that's all this is, siblings. It's advertising, not allyship. Yes, there are some corporate firms which match their pride collections with donations and DEI initiatives, but for every one of those, there is a brand donating to an explicitly anti-queer senator while they espouse how much they love gay people. An investigation by Popular Informatics found that brands like AT&T, Walmart, and CVS donated over $10 million, that's $1 million, to anti-LGBTQ plus state and federal politicians in just 2019 and 2020. These are brands that are widely accepted as the best of rainbow capitalism. They're rated highly by the Human Rights Campaign, one of the largest LGBTQ plus NGOs in the world. If the best that we can get from rainbow capitalism are brands that actively donate to the very politicians actively repressing queer people, there's very little, in my eyes, that can save rainbow capitalism over the course of this debate. These corporations use the optics and slang of queer people to depoliticize and sterilize queer liberation. They pretend to be in the know about queer culture while actively perpetuating harmful stereotypes about our community. They market queer liberation as buying ugly merchandise from Target rather than grassroots collective activism. I challenge you all not to brush aside this point, but to seriously contend with the placating effect of rainbow capitalism on our society. But I can hear it now. In your heads, you think this might be true, but don't we live under capitalism? So maybe allying ourselves with the capitalists isn't the worst thing in the world? Yes, siblings, we do live under capitalism, and corporate allyship still sucks. Rainbow capitalism has always prioritized a stereotyped vision of the queer community where queer people are white, wealthy, cis gay men. This is inherent to rainbow capitalism, as capitalists seek the dollars of the queer community. Anyone without money, aka queer people of color, trans people, are necessarily excluded and marginalized. This is likely why a third of the community says that queer marketing makes them feel bad about themselves. These narratives are not just rhetorical. They fundamentally shape the way society sees the queer community, especially among non-ally straight people. Even if, and that's, folks, a huge, huge if, rainbow capitalism could deliver any support for LGBTQ plus people, this support is not going to the most vulnerable and targeted members of the community, but to the relatively mainstream white gay man. And the community right now is vulnerable, and we are targeted. Trump 2 has proved to be so much worse than any of us could have imagined. From day one in office, Trump has made queer people, trans people, most of all, the target of his seemingly limitless executive authority. Did 100, I just found out it's actually 100, not 30 years of rainbow capitalism do anything to prevent this? No. And as following act speakers will elaborate, many of the most visible brands of rainbow capitalism have actively chosen to cower and leave the LGBTQ community to fight for itself rather than be the ally they like to depict themselves as every June. The queer community needs and deserves more than ugly Target t-shirts. We need a government committed to our equality. After 100 years of rainbow capitalism, I would say in many ways the LGBTQ plus community is worse off today than we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. Rainbow capitalism fails to deliver any tangible, meaningful way while actively perpetuating stereotypes and narratives that harm queer people. The only people that rainbow capitalism supports are homophobes and transphobes with the cannon fodder that is their pride collections. Thank you.
Sister President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumna, and guests. Family and friends, I have one question to ask you. If you could have any superpower on Earth, what would it be? What would it be? Now, I'm sure most of you right now are probably thinking like super strength, super speed, teleportation. For those of you who are really basic, you're probably wishing you had the ability to fly. But if you had went back in time, asked little old Ian, or little old brother Robert, if you want to, what superpower he wanted, I would say I wanted the power to be invisible. Invisibility has always been a concept that deeply intrigued me. Whether it was Violet from The Incredibles or Harry Potter with his invisibility cloak, the ability to not be seen has always seemed kind of awesome to me. That is until I got a taste of what it actually feels like to be invisible on the very campus of this PWI. Shortly after starting my freshman year, I noticed something peculiar. I noticed that whenever I walked along the sidewalks, going to class, to a dining hall in my dorm, the people who I passed by seemed not to notice me. They seemed not to truly see me. As time went on, I noticed that it was specifically white students who would act as if I wasn't there. They would walk right into me, force me off the sidewalk and into the street, and when they had to acknowledge my presence, they would act like it was my fault. After talking with some other students of color, they too said they were experiencing the same situation. The more these incidents occurred, the more I began to feel completely invisible at this university. I had come to realize that the thing I once thought was a superpower was actually a curse. I shared this story with you because millions of members of the LGBTQ community can relate to my experience, albeit in a different way. Unfortunately, feelings of invisibility and erasure have become almost intrinsic to life as a queer person. Whether it be a young boy standing alone in a gym in his middle school, shunned by his peers because he said he likes other boys, or whether it be two small-town women being wed together without either of their families present because they said it just wasn't right. According to recent data, 60% of LGBTQ youth reported feeling society does not fully accept or acknowledge their identity. This blatant neglect by broader society is nothing new. Queer Americans have been part of this nation for as long as there has been in America. Their presence has just been refused to be acknowledged. That brings us to today, the 21st century, a time unlike any other in American history, where the bands of equality are being stretched to include more and more people, a time where visibility and equality are being spread to communities like the LGBT community. Communities that have fought so long and hard for these ideals. One vessel through which this visibility has been paid is through Rainbow Capitalism. This system, though definitely flawed like any other, has gained an unjust reputation in recent years. As the negation we'll present tonight, this reputation does not seem to take into account the many ways rainbow capitalism has and continues to benefit the queer community. As I have mentioned, and as Sister Waters will expound upon, rainbow capitalism has skyrocketed queer visibility into the stratosphere, leading to greater exposure and normalization, firmly establishing queer culture as an inherent part of American culture in the process. As Brother Westrick will argue, rainbow capitalism provides the LGBT community with the presence of the American cultural platform that is not only invaluable to their acceptance in this country, but around the world. As Sister Orlette will discuss, the support that rainbow capitalism provides the queer community, no matter how performative, is beneficial and only taken for granted by those coming from a place of privilege. Everyone, the negation wants to be very clear. We recognize that as an inherently capitalistic system, rainbow capitalism is not perfect and shares many of the failures of the system from which it comes. But siblings and friends, just because something is not perfect, that does not mean that it is a net detriment. Friends, let us not discount the small steps on the way to a larger victory. You can't appreciate a rainbow in all of its splendor and beauty unless it is visible. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Madam President, members of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni, and guests. The term pride has many definitions, multiple meanings reflected from different groups. For members of the LGBTQ+ community, the Merriam-Webster definition of pride as respect and appreciation for oneself as members of a group, and especially a marginalized group, likely resonates more than the definition I was taught as a child raised in a conservative Mormon household. For 8-year-old me, another Merriam-Webster definition might fit better for what I was taught. Pride, exaggerated self-esteem, excessive appreciation of one's own worth or virtue, and conceit. As I grew up and increasingly disagreed with the condescending view of pride that had been so deeply ingrained in me as a child, one thing became glaringly obvious. The people I grew up with attending the same Mormon church would, each Sunday, denounce being homosexual with unyielding disgust. But come Monday, when it was time to attend work and live outside the bubble of religious fervor, the messaging suddenly switched to love one another, or simply hate the sin, love the sinner. This facade of respect or even tolerance adapted outside of church settings would be immediately dropped upon stepping up to the pulpit to address the congregation. While the resolution today does not address the homophobia rampant in church settings, it is clear that the same tactics adopted by the church of my upbringing are being used by corporations touting rainbow logos and floats at pride parades. The facade of tolerance and respect is just that, a facade. This artificial support of the LGBTQ+ community is best encapsulated by the common phrase, actions speak louder than words. In this analogy, the words of the corporations participating in rainbow capitalism are multicolored merchandise, logos that change from monochromatic to rainbow for 1 month of the year, and pride floats where employees of said corporations march with their employer's name painted on their shirts. The actions include donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to legislators actively attempting to undermine LGBTQ+ constituents of their rights. According to Open Secrets, a research group dedicated to uncovering the flow of money in American politics, in 2020 and 2022, corporations like AT&T, CVS, Lyft, and Amazon donated upwards of $884,000 to state legislators and governors implementing anti-LGBTQ+ legislation in their states. The issue with these corporations parading as allies during Pride Month is that their money is nowhere near where their mouths are. During the first month of his presidency, current President Donald Trump has already enacted 3 executive orders that directly threaten the existence of LGBTQ+ people. One involves banning transgender people from serving in the military, another prevents transgender youth from receiving gender-affirming care, and the last rescinds federal funding from schools that recognize transgender students as valid in their gender identity. Among the attendees flanking President Trump during his inauguration included notable names such as Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, and Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, among others. These tech industry titans get to avoid the backlash for their support of President Trump's policy by pointing to the rainbow graphics and pride floats under their names. But at the end of the day, these corporations are supporting the one thing that can actively undermine the rights and safety of the queer community, anti-LGBTQ+ laws and legislation. This leads to the root of the issue with rainbow capitalism. The rights of minorities are directly at odds with the desires of corporations. Corporations must prioritize their own survival, which includes funding legislators who vote in favor of anti-LGBTQ+ legislation and donating to campaigns to officials seeking to undermine the rights of queer people. The same legislators that vote on issues that protect corporations and bring money to their states. While public image is also important to corporations, nothing negatively affects a corporation more than losing support from legislators who determine the fate of their business. Corporations have learned to ride the fine line of positive public image and survival in business by painting themselves rainbow as they hand $1 million check to the legislator signing away the rights of the queer community. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Sister President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni, and guests. My best friend's parents' names are named Jane and Lorraine. Jane and Lorraine are the type of people you unofficially adopt as your second parents straight away. They hug you warmly when you walk in the door, and they insist you stay for dinner even though you swear you're not hungry. They have cheesy, outdated pictures of coffee on the kitchen wall their hallway is filled with cheesy Disney family photos, outdated signs about needing coffee to function on the kitchen wall, and a small but mighty collection of pride-themed knickknacks around their house. We always laugh and call it cheesy when they come home with a rainbow wine glass, but nothing beats looking at the smile on my best friend's face when they bring another pride pin home for her backpack. Rainbow capitalism is not simply about the product itself. It's about what it means to people. It says you are visible. Rainbow capitalism's impact is not solely measured in profits and dollars. It's measured in moments like these. It has brought queer identities into recognized spaces. It's a mother absentmindedly picking up pride merch in a Walmart because she thought of her daughter. It's a nervous teenager walking to a store, seeing pride front and center that there is a pride collection, and he sees that there is room in the world for him. According to the Trevor Project, queer youth are nearly 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their peers. But studies show that just one sign of visible acceptance can significantly lower that risk. Nearly half of queer youth have immediate families that do not accept or know about their identity. They might not get acceptance from inside their home, but they can see their identities recognized, celebrated, and normalized in popular spaces. Rainbow Capitalism offers that visibility. For some, a pride t-shirt is just a cheesy t-shirt, but for others, it's proof that they need to hide and that they deserve to take up space not only on a clothes rack, but in the mainstream world. Visibility spreads. A single product may seem small, like a singular sparkler in your hand, but siblings and guests sparks catch. And when millions see queer identities reflected in mainstream spaces, they ignite into something impossible to ignore. That is power and change, and is simply not a net detriment. Visibility is power. There was a time not that long ago when queer identities were forced to be hidden away, where pride was completely dangerous. Now queer existence is present in the aisles of grocery stores, in the world's most popular campaign ads, and in everyday life. I will not. That is not harmful. It's not just about people buying these products either, it's about people simply seeing them. Target sees over 30 million customers every single week. Bath & Body Works has over 38 million. Nike boasts a staggering 30 million members a year. These are massive, influential companies with enormous fan bases. When you factor in hundreds of other companies, the square of visibility is undeniable. To people like my best friend who just want to be seen, that matters. A company's intentions do not erase its positive impact on everyday people. Yes.
So you talk about how visibility is important for queer people, even if they can just see this, but does this same visibility not encourage harmful groups or those who might be against queer identity to lash out at a public representation of these groups?
Of course, and I think that the fact that these are controversial is just a record that says that rainbow capitalism is doing something where people are saying, hey, this is bad, and that is showing visibility. That is showing that these people are here and they have a force in these stores that is not going anywhere. Before rainbows lined the shelves and before pride designs were used as logos, big corporations were silent. And like I've said earlier, silence can kill. Rainbow Capitalism is rainbow-themed Coca-Cola cans in the grocery store. It's Nike promoting Pride-themed shoes during the Olympics. It's Pride playlist on Spotify and Fortnite's Rainbow Royale. No matter your interests, no matter your shopping habits, Rainbow Capitalism is present. Yes.
So you say rainbow-colored Coca-Cola cans and stuff like that. So how can it be good that they're putting rainbows in Coca-Cola cans when Coca-Cola is exploiting others?
So I would say that the normal consumer, the normal person, especially queer youth, they have no idea about this, and I think that we need to think about the outcome of people just simply seeing them represented in these large corporations and saying, hey, I exist, and that is completely okay. I will not. This commercialization leads to it being everywhere, visible in everyday life. And that is a good thing, no matter what the affirmation will tell you. Rainbow capitalism is not a perfect system. It does not solve every problem, but it does create something so vital that every queer person deserves to feel. Seen, known, and completely, unapologetically visible. Thank you, I yield the floor.
Mr. President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni, and guests. In February of last year, there was a high school student named Nex. Nex was taunted, made fun of, and bullied for being transgender and non-binary. On February 7th, Nex was in one of the high school's bathrooms when they were assaulted by 3 peers and their head was beaten against the bathroom tile until they went unconscious. The next day, on February 8th, Nex's stepmother called the police to their home because Nex's breathing was stopping and their eyes were rolling back into their head. Paramedics performed CPR on Nex on the way to the hospital but weren't able to save them. They committed suicide by overdose the day after being beaten into the tile of their high school bathroom for their identity and for who they loved. This happened in Owasso, Oklahoma, in Owasso High School, an institution that 4 of my cousins attended. I've been there. It's a small city stuck in its ways. But it's not alone in its backward sentiments towards people of the queer community. In a recent national school climate survey, over 68% of LGBTQ+ students reported that in the past year they experienced verbal harassment, and over a quarter reported physical harassment at school based on their sexual orientation. Crime data shows that more than 1 in 5 of any type of hate crime is now motivated by anti-LGBTQ+ bias, and queer teens are more than 4% likely to commit suicide as their peers, as the negation has already told you tonight. The Trevor Project estimates that more than 1.8 million LGBTQ+ young people seriously consider suicide each year in the United States, and at least one attempts suicide every 45 seconds. The epidemic of homophobia in our nation is a real issue in need of real attention, real conversations, and real change. Change takes finances. There are countless nonprofit organizations that fund lifeline numbers for transgender Americans struggling with suicidal thoughts. The people working on the ends of these hotlines work off solely donations. And so do the LGBTQ+ homeless organizations and peaceful protests and marches and advocate organizations that need finance to continue their work. Those things make real change. What doesn't make real change is faulty representation alongside hatred disguised as a facade of support. For example, AT&T graciously made sure to announce their $1 million donation to the Trevor Project in 2018, but didn't publicly advertise their almost $3 million donation to queer-phobic politicians in the same year. For every loud one step forward these corporations advertise, they're taking 2 steps backward in silence. And no one is calling them out on it because they're trying to cover their tracks with ingenuine donations that are pennies to these conglomerates. And according to research done by the PR agency Reboot in 2024, only roughly 60% of these organizations profiting off of LGBTQ+ themed products provide philanthropic support to even one of these specific organizations. 40% of the companies waving rainbow flags are taking money in the faces of smaller LGBTQ+ owned businesses and pocketing the cash, giving none back to the cause that they care so much about. In addition, when you take meaningful LGBTQ+ conversations out of meaningful conversations and protests and contexts and put them on the clothing line of a billion-dollar enterprise, not only is the purpose diminished, but the movement is set back. Firstly, the visibility given is often disrespectful and awful representation. And secondly, it makes consumers complacent. Why would someone take to the street to protest injustice when they feel they've done their part by purchasing a shirt that says Pride? Oftentimes, these companies even send out these products, then turn around and donate.
Ms. Gatz, question please.
Yes.
So you say these corporations, right, they're ingenuine, they donate to these politicians that don't support, the LGBTQ+ community. So what can they do instead to be more genuine? Or is it inherently just they can't do anything to be?
They absolutely just need to be more genuine. They could donate more than for example, what I said with AT&T, they basically wrote off the money that they donated to a cause with the $3 million that they donated against the cause. So they could donate to hotlines to help people like Next and so many other causes and nonprofits. The Rainbow Youth Project suicide hotline saw a 700% increase in monthly calls when they were coming up on the recent election. And how did these LGBTQ+ loving corporations respond? By dropping their DEI policies. The rainbow capitalism of corporations undermines and distracts from the movement we're discussing tonight. Companies are profiting off of a situation that needs serious attention and consideration. They're using it for PR when real action is of the essence. A national survey found that almost half of queer youth seriously considered ending their life in 2023. There is no time to waste on rainbow capitalism. The youth of our nation need us now. They need us to donate to what matters, like LGBTQ+ hotlines, because it could mean the difference between life and death for someone like Next. Because they're one of the millions that we are never getting back. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Sister President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumna, and most welcome guests. Last June, Sister Bus and I attended Capitol Pride, DC's local Pride celebration. This was my first ever big Pride parade. We stood alongside hundreds of people crammed into our short section of the street, only a block away from the White House and across the street from a very fancy Marriott. The parade kicked off with an appearance from Keke Palmer, and there were and the sheer multitude of companies, churches, and other organizations that followed was astonishing. There were a few unexpected appearances, including a float for DC Water and a group from the Department of Homeland Security. But corporation after corporation, including McDonald's, Verizon, and Delta, continued to roll down the street bearing pride flags and sporting rainbow logos. But DC Pride is not an anomaly. Pride parades around the country look the same, the logos of their corporate sponsors pasted at every corner. Tonight, the affirmation would have you believe that this rainbow capitalism does more harm than good to the interests of the queer community. Not just that this is ineffective at advancing interests. No, they must show you that there's enough harm imposed on the queer community to outweigh any of the benefits that it may provide. But here's the thing, what's good for queer people is often good for business. One UK-based consulting firm estimates that queer people in the United States have roughly $1 trillion in buying power, and companies have picked up on this. Pride events offer a significant market for corporations to advertise to. Companies have also noted that queer customers are more likely to be loyal to a brand that actually markets to them. But that's just it. Rainbow capitalism is simply niche marketing targeting a niche market. It's a standard business practice in the business world. Even when companies face backlash for pride displays and campaigns, many will maintain these practices. As one consulting manager put it, for every customer knocking the display over, there's 10 more who love it. Almost 2/3 of Americans support the LGBTQ community, even if these politicians are not representative of this population. And this 2/3 of Americans have made rainbow capitalism even more supportive to these corporations.
Mr. Shaken, question is here.
Yes.
You say that queer people are more likely to buy from a company that markets to them. But what do you have to say to the sentiment that the affirmations expressed, where these companies may be marketing to queer people, but are not actually supporting the group, that they may in fact be donating to the opposition?
And therein lies the beauty of being an informed consumer. I'm going to draw some parallels between greenwashing and rainbow washing here. It is, should it be? No, but is it up to the consumer to make informed decisions about what they are purchasing and from the companies that they are purchasing from? Yes, and that's not something that's limited to solely pride campaigns. That's something that we find everywhere. Is that a flaw with capitalism? Yes. No. However, even when the backlash towards these campaigns is significant, these companies may still support the queer community in other ways. For example, after showing their support of trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney, Bud Light sales dropped by 23% the following May. Despite this, the parent company, Anheuser-Busch, actually increased their donations to San Francisco Pride and continue to support Pride celebrations in St. Louis, Chicago, and Charlotte.
Mr. President, question from the speaker.
Not right now. Even after Target faced backlash for their pride displays and then even more backlash for how they responded to it, they never wavered in their $175,000 sponsorship for NYC Pride. For many companies, rainbow capitalism is about more than just good business, even though most of the time profit and good values can and do coexist. And at its core is rainbow capitalism a commodification of identity and experience? Perhaps. But this is not a debate of intent or state of being or ethics. This is a debate about outcome and about the effects rainbow capitalism has on queer people regardless of what companies have to glean from it. Because, once again, what is good for businesses can be good for queer people. Have you ever noticed that you can attend most major pride festivals for free? Well, we have corporate sponsorships to thank for that. Even though for many companies their primary intent may be capitalistic, it's important to keep in mind that these sponsorships are what make Pride accessible. This rainbow capitalism is what allows people to attend Pride. Not currently. To celebrate queer identities and support these communities. When the outcome of this marketing is that thousands of more people are able to attend Pride around the country, uplifting and supporting one another and increasing visibility, how can we say that any harm imposed outweighs such an immense benefit? I remember walking back to my dorm after DC Pride, rainbow on my cheeks, and I got a happy pride from the first person at the desk. And that left an impact. I did not feel that my identity was commodified, only that I was seen.
Madam President, members of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumna, and guests. This Sunday at Phi Kappa's 205th anniversary, I had the great pleasure of chatting with Ms. Tipton. You look amazing, by the way. During this conversation, Ms. Tipton informed me that Ms. Bussa, my sponsor, was also her sponsor. And so we naturally established ourselves as identical siblings. But standing next to her right now, I think that the resemblance is mostly spiritual. If you can't tell, I am African American, and as an African American, I'm no stranger to some of the worst instances of identity-based marketing known to man. In 2021, Joe Biden signed a law to mark June 19th as a federal holiday, celebrating the official end of slavery in the United States. A year later, Walmart thought it wise to launch their Juneteenth flavored ice cream in stores. There are many, many very obvious questions to be asked here, but the one at the forefront of my mind is, what flavor is Juneteenth? Who's the genius who got to decide how sweet, or how tangy, or how savory slavery is? A few days prior, the Children's Museum of Indianapolis faced backlash for offering what was labeled as Juneteenth watermelon salad in their food court. Right, I don't have to say anything else about that. What is so heinous and so terrifying about these kinds of products is not that there are entire product management teams who somehow missed how they would be interpreted, but rather the ability of these products to completely distill the identity and the struggle of an entire people into a handful of marketable symbols and catchy slogans. Black people and queer people, like Mr. Roberts said, tend to be extremely analogous when it comes to conversations about ridiculous performative marketing. Every June, we can rely on corporations like Walmart, Target, or PepsiCo to give it their sum and stick a lazy rainbow or a questionable acronym on whatever they believe will sell best. You don't have to take my word for it. Take it from Mark and Spencer Foods, a grocery company who decided to grace the world with their LGBT sandwich. Lettuce, guacamole, bacon, and tomato. Or Burger King, who released the Proud Whopper, a regular Burger King Whopper complete with 2 top buns, or 2 bottom buns, and wrapped in rainbow paper. You may find yourself eager to side with the more comfortable and more digestible views of the negation, the outdated Kardashian-esque idea that all publicity is good publicity. But ask yourself, what about the LGBTQ plus community is being publicized? Certainly not the complexities of the queer identity, and of course never the raw and ugly history of struggle that has afflicted them. What is being broadcasted loudly and obnoxiously each June is the most sanitized, diluted, and corporate-friendly version of an identity that has asked for and deserves so much more. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, this is how you fade a community into obscurity. Capitalists and government executives can't quite get away with the overt suppression of the past, but what they can do is perpetuate the evil of the commodified identity. When you strip a group of people of their cultural depth, diminish their marketable aesthetic, you weaken their public power, their ability to be taken seriously, and the significance of their culture. You escape the scrutiny of saying that you erase their culture, but you actively absorb it and soften it until it no longer poses a threat to the systems that sought to destroy it. You know the Proud Whopper, but do you know Harvey Milk, the first openly gay politician to be elected in California who was later assassinated? You'd recognize the Rainbow Bud Lights or the Rainbow Coca-Colas, but would you recognize Sylvia Rivera, a queer rights pioneer and a Stonewall veteran? Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, if you remember nothing that I said tonight, I ask you to remember this. To boil down the identity of a community into a set of marketable symbols is to dehumanize them. And I'm glad that Ms. Orlett reminded us of the burden tonight, because there is no system that actively dehumanizes a group of people that can ever be considered anything but a net negative. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Sister President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni, and guests. We live in a society. Yes, it's true. And our economic system is a capitalistic one. I know. But this is the state of the world. This means private companies get to choose what they make, or so you thought. In reality, it's the demand of the people that dictates what policies a corporation can viably follow. If there isn't support for a product, if people aren't buying it, it becomes very unlikely that a company would continue pursuing that course of action. Most companies don't want to subsidize some venture that won't turn a profit or can't be reasonably expected to do so. So we see in the free market a pattern of commercial trends following social trends. Rainbow capitalism is a reflection following the true essence of the LGBTQ plus community, not defining it. So companies donning rainbow logos in commercial showings of pride might be less of a negative factor for the community than the affirmation has let on. It's actually less of a factor at all. Market forces reflect demand. In the end, the success of a corporate policy is determined by consumer interest. With an already strong and flourishing LGBTQ plus movement, there is no reflection of it in the free market. Companies can't make something catch on. They don't create cultural norms. They can only choose to reinforce them. The spark, no, the fire is here. It's inside the movement and it's growing. The LGBTQ plus community is not and never has been defined negatively or positively by the commercialization that follows it. And rainbow capitalism is just the strength of the community shaping market behavior. The affirmation might say, but isn't it true that the free market reflection still has the capacity to harm the interests of the community? Might it reinforce harmful stereotypes? Might it reduce queer culture to an aesthetic or a commodity? These concerns are founded with good intentions, but they necessitate larger, dangerous conclusions.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker,
Not right now. After all, we aren't arguing about dismantling capitalism. We're arguing about what it does to harm or support the LGBTQ plus community. So if rainbow capitalism is actively harming the community and we cannot reform the market system, the obvious solutions should seem to be diminishing or eliminating the community's market presence to stop playing the game. This is the logical conclusion of the affirmation's contention, even if it's not explicitly what we're arguing right now. We still have to account for what our vote indicates at the end of the night about the state of the world. Also, if the Sure.
Isn't it true that a lot of things do have negative externalities and deadly loss, that negative things do come out even in an efficient looking economy?
I don't think the efficiency of the economy is exactly the point I'm trying to make here. I'm talking about the presence of the community in the market system is an important factor of having a community in the country that we live in. I'm going to keep with my speech right now. Also, if the contention includes that the community is lacking a sincerity of support from the corporations, as has been argued before, I would argue that no capitalistic venture is sincere. That's our market system. But why is there a crucial importance in the market presence of any community? Because groups unrepresented in the economy will struggle for social legitimacy in the eyes of the wider public. An example of this phenomenon is the Native American community, who lack a strong presence in mainstream consumer culture. They don't have an equivalent to rainbow capitalism. And as a result, Native American identities aren't nearly as visible in the public eye. The market system isn't highlighting their issues or supporting their initiatives in the same way they are for LGBTQ plus issues and initiatives.
Question for the speaker.
Sure.
Perchance, an example of Native American pride would be cultural appropriation and wearing their headdresses and that kind of visibility, then where is your stance on the existence of these people just existing and the visibility can be cultural appropriation or offensive?
I think the premise that a pride showing of their culture would be inherently offensive is just completely wrong. You can do it in the right way, and it can be done. You can celebrate someone's culture without appropriating it, and so it's not fair to say that it's inherent in doing so to make it in that sort of way. Not right now. If you follow the affirmation's contention, you give up the many ways the LGBTQ plus community has benefited from rainbow capitalism, where market forces are reinforcing visibility and mass normalization, highlighting issues and supporting LGBTQ+ initiatives. All of this is tied together with the understanding that we are arguing about the outcomes of rainbow capitalism and the resulting impact on the LGBTQ+ community. The outcomes, not the intentions. It has been well established that capitalism is in it for the profit. Rainbow capitalism is undoubtedly a commodification of some kind, but does it go so far as to commodify the identities contained within the community? With the understanding that the market follows the trends, it's hard to say that it does. Pride is burning brighter than ever, and with the current state of the country, we need more tools for visibility, more methods for inclusion, more power to reinforce the normalization we've achieved thus far. And we're getting it through a system that has a vested interest in appealing to the people, the free market. Where oppression may reign, where hate and xenophobia may try to stifle out the good, I'm quite pleased to have an ally who just wants some money. Thank you, I yield the floor.
You may.
Madam President, members of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni, and guests, we've all experienced it. Walking into a store in the middle of June, there it is, a display of pride, with t-shirts to pins to rainbow mouthwash. And at first, you probably don't think anything of it. If anything, you think it's a good thing. We're standing with the community. That's good, right? Wrong. These companies aren't standing with the LGBTQ+ community. They're profiting off of them. They're profiting and exploiting a community that is already a minority and a community that is already facing backlash every single day in this country. Let me ask you this. Do companies such as Target and Walmart support the LGBTQ+ community any other time of the year outside the month of June? Do you see rainbows any other time on any other products, on profile pictures any other time? No, they only support the group when it's convenient for them, when everybody else is doing it, and when they think they'll get backlash if they don't. We see the pattern during Black History Month, Latin American Heritage Month, and Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. These companies try to profit off the idea that they support minority groups, and when the profit stops, so does their support. In 2023, Target faced major backlash from conservative groups following the rollout of that year's Pride collection, which included tuck-friendly women's swimsuits, made for trans women who have not undergone gender-affirming surgery. This led to conservatives kicking down displays and threatening Target shoppers and workers.
Mr. President, question for the speaker?
Yes.
So you talk about this support being swept under the rug after these time periods end, but what makes this any different than any other holiday if we're looking at a capitalist system where it's going to be popular for a certain amount of time, you're going to sell it more, and then not present these products? Like, you wouldn't be buying St. Patrick's things in the middle of Christmas. What makes this different than any other holiday or any other big event having things marketed?
Because the existence of the LGBTQ+ community is not a holiday. These are people.
Madam Speaker, question for, or Madam President, question for the Speaker.
Not at this time. This backlash led to Target pulling items off of their shelves. They were no longer selling tuck-friendly bathing suits for trans women. This backlash came at the same time that nearly 500 anti-LGBTQ+ bills had gone before state legislations. With companies like Target exploiting minority communities, they are putting them in front of a firing squad. Even worse, these companies pull the trigger themselves when they give in to the conservatives. And while homophobia and transphobia exist in everyday life, not just during Pride, When you exploit a group and you put them in front of everybody, it makes them, it's easier to harm them because they're at the forefront.
Mr. Harris, we'll speak for you.
Not at this time. With the initial rollout of Target's tuck-friendly swimsuits, right-wing extremists tweeted things such as, "Target has hit the woke bullseye again." And speaking in extreme harmful manner towards trans women, referring to these swimsuits as something for mentally ill men. After all this, you would think Target, who supposedly supports the LGBTQ plus community, would stand up against the people being harmful towards the group they support, but they don't. Instead, they cower. They give in and say that they're sorry and erase the LGBTQ plus community from their vocabulary. Rather than profiting, exploiting, and putting a minority group that they should be supporting right into the hands of those who hate them, they should be actively supporting them and standing beside them rather than trying to get in good with the community. The idea of rainbow capitalism being detrimental to the LGBTQ plus community has been proven just recently, with Target, who supposedly supports the community, erasing their DEI policies, a decision that proves that Target doesn't actually support the community.
Madam President, question for the Speaker.
Will the Speaker yield?
Not at this time. That the Target doesn't actually support the community, but they were only using them. In conclusion, the negation will try and convince you that this does no harm to the community. But that isn't true. It's exploitative and it's dangerous. Not only do these companies show no remorse when it comes to appeasing right-wing extremists rather than standing beside the community they supposedly support. And here's a question. Okay, I yield the floor.
Madam President, members of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, and fellow guests. By this time, we all know that the affirmation has been handed the burden of proving rainbow capitalism is a net detriment to the queer community. As the saying goes, any press is good press, right? So, rainbow capitalism brings a visibility to the queer community that isn't seen any other time of the year, even if it's only in June during Pride Month. It brings an awareness to the cause. Like my best friend's trans. She transitioned her freshman year of college. Where am I going with this? Rainbow capitalism, I mean, she feels supported by it. I mean, at least from what I get from my conversations with her. The blahage sharks, the outfits, the clothing, it makes her feel accepted and seen by not just like corporations, but by the world as a whole, right? And even if that's not true, even if there's violence against the queer community, against trans people, it brings a certain feeling of comfort to at least my friend. The affirmation has stated that companies companies donate to queer community, charities and organizations during Pride Month or just in general to help their facing in the community, and then they go around and donate to a right-wing politician, to somebody who openly says, "I hate gay people, I hate trans people," right? But a company doesn't donate based on feelings. They donate based on the bottom dollar. Like, AT&T didn't go around and donate that $3 million to politicians because AT&T hates the queer community.
Question for the Speaker.
Yes.
Can't chasing that bottom dollar be detrimental to the queer people?
Yes. However, it can. However, AT&T probably didn't donate that money in a detrimental manner. Sure, supporting them is detrimental to the queer community, but they probably donated that money because they want a power line built to their data center, or they want a telephone. Yes.
Is it more beneficial to the queer community that, say, a couple hundred suburban moms feel comfortable wearing a pride t-shirt that says slay? Or is it better for the queer community that we have millions of dollars not given to politicians who would take away our right to marry, to love, to be loved, to exist in public, things like that?
Yes. However, the point I'm trying to get at is that companies aren't donating to these politicians because of their politicians' views, most likely. I'm not speaking on all companies like Elon Musk. He donated to Trump because he hates everybody. But like AT&T, they're a phone company. They donated to these politicians because they're going to pass a bill that helps their phone.
Citizen President. Question, please.
Not at this time.
Here.
Like, it's not inherently discriminatory to donate to a politician, even if, regardless of that politician's views. They want something from that politician, and that's typically not discrimination towards the queer community. That's.
Question for the speaker.
Yes.
Is it not true that this debate is about outcome and not intent?
Yes. Though it's not inherently Rainbow Capitalism funding this these donations. Like they're not turning around and taking the donation, because we're debating if Rainbow Capitalism is the detriment, and this is just normal capitalism being a detriment. Like. Like this isn't the proceeds from a Pride Month being donated to a right-wing politician. This is, regular proceeds. Not at this time. Companies, at the end of the day, are interested in the bottom dollar, and I keep saying this, They do that not out of hatred. They do that out of money, the want for money. So corporations, politicians, they're donating for whatever reason. They're going to get a bill passed that gives them the right to outsource their labor to children in. What state was it? I was in a state and there was McDonald's and there was a 12-year-old checking me out. I'm not kidding. It was a 12-year-old.
They're here.
So the affirmation has not proved without a doubt that. I yield the floor.
Madam President, members of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumna, and guests. Let's kiss for gay rights. Queerness is celestial. Came for the gay rights, stayed for the gay wrongs. Fun, clever, and relatable slogans created by queer artists for queer people. That's what true visibility looks like. It's about empowering LGBTQ+ individuals and exposing the masses to the queer experience. Despite being thoughtfully and meticulously created, these designs were quickly abandoned following the protests against Target's Pride collection in 2023. By 2024, many queer artists who had been excited to collaborate with a company they believed genuinely supported them were abruptly dropped without any explanation. Some artists whose products were already in production were told they had to forfeit both branding and rights to their artwork. To make matters worse, Target informed one artist that their designs would only be sold in the top 75 Pride-friendly stores, completely undermining the idea that these collections were meant to promote visibility across the entire country. Rather than standing by the artists and claim to support, Target chose to erase the very community behind these designs. They chose to sell watered-down, stereotypical versions that better fit their idea of the queer experience and their own narrative of the LGBTQ community. And their own safety concerns. Corporations like Target enjoyed spreading their own narrative of the LGBTQ+ community during Pride Month. Notably, Postmates campaigns to Eat with Pride, the bottom-friendly menu.
Yes, it's exactly what you imagine. To quote them, you shouldn't miss a good meal for a good time. Creating an ad campaign solely focused on the intimate relationships between queer people is simply weird. By framing queer relationships primarily around sex, it enforces the idea that LGBTQ plus individuals are defined by their sexual identity rather than their humanity. This can inadvertently reinforce the notion that queer people are inherently deviant or other, which contributes to the ongoing stigmatization of the community. As a result, Pride becomes a mere spectacle. Yes.
So, when you talk about Burger King menu and how it's dehumanizing the queer community, you can also draw a parallel to the film industry and how it's doing the same thing by often overtly sexualizing gay men and gay women to appease straight audiences, like straight women who want to see gay men and straight men who want to see gay women in a publicly appropriate sexual context.
I definitely think that is a big issue in the film industry, but the viewer, I like to look into specifically queer productions for queer people, and there's a lot of beautiful films and beautiful books that accurately represent queer struggles and the struggle of finding out, or not finding out, but finding someone you love and then being the same gender. And I think there is a right way to promote this visibility, just like the t-shirts that were designed by these queer artists, but were abruptly dropped by Target. As a result, Pride becomes a mere spectacle, stripping away the decades of queer activism that is meant to honor and compromising the core goal of the queer community, to achieve universal acceptance. Rainbow capitalism trivializes the real concerns of Pride, alienating the people who lost their lives to earn the right to be outwardly queer. While visibility is important, rainbow capitalism as it is now is detrimental to the LGBTQ plus community. The harm of rainbow capitalism lies in its conditional nature. For starters, corporations only act as an ally during the month of June, releasing new campaigns and logos all sporting some variation of a rainbow. Pride Month displays are treated the same as second-tier seasonal holidays, only around for a limited time, in stores for a maximum 30 days, promoted for less. 30 days does not equate to the lifelong challenges one faces when they are queer. The rise of rainbow capitalism only during June teaches the LGBTQ plus community that they only deserve to be visible 8% of the year. It encourages the harmful notion that LGBTQ plus rights and visibility are only important when it's convenient for profit. This tokenistic approach censors the daily struggles, discrimination, and erasure the queer individuals face beyond that brief window of acceptance. This is inherently harmful to the LGBTQ plus community, as they are treated like a trend to be marketed, rather than as individuals deserving of consistent recognition, respect, and equality every day of the year. Fundamentally, rainbow capitalism turns LGBTQ plus identities into a commodity that can be bought and sold, emphasizing visibility only when it increases corporate profits. This short-lived support during Pride Month is exploitation rather than allyship. By putting sales ahead of rights, struggles, and the humanity of LGBTQ plus people, it sanitizes a long history of gay advocacy. More than just a logo or catchphrase, true visibility entails year-round vocal amplification, genuine allyship, and constant support. Rainbow capitalism will keep hurting the very community it claims to support unless businesses stop treating Pride like a fad and start demonstrating genuine commitment. Being queer is a lifetime struggle for acceptance, equality, and respect. It is not a seasonal marketing gimmick. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Sister President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni. The affirmation tonight, they brought a ton of examples of problems that are intrinsic to capitalism, of problems of externalities caused by capitalism. But they've tiptoed around sort of the actual topic where, the very niche topic we're debating tonight, which is rainbow capitalism. So I want to reduce the scope of our debate a little bit here. One of our previous rebuttal speakers mentioned this. The affirmation, they've talked about how corporations donate to anti-LGBT politicians.
which is certainly a great issue. It's a travesty. But intentions here, they matter just a little bit, because corporations, when they donate to these politicians, they're doing it because there's a pretty big overlap between, in terms of right-wing politicians, between those who oppose the LGBTQ community and those who oppose government regulations in general. They're donating money to these politicians so that they can eliminate regulation. Is this still a problem? Absolutely. This is a terrible problem. It's a problem with lobbying in our political system. It's a problem with capitalism in general. But it's not a problem with rainbow capitalism specifically. It's not a problem with the commercialization of LGBT plus identity events and customs by big corporations. That is not the origin of these donations. These donations to anti-LGBTQ politicians would have happened regardless of whether these corporations would have partaken in rainbow capitalism or not. And I also want to touch on another point one of the previous affirmation speakers mentioned. They mentioned how DEI programs have been eliminated across over the last few months. And that is certainly true. The government especially has played a major role in eliminating DEI programs across the country. But in many cases, corporations have actually ended up being defenders of DEI. Corporations such as Costco, for example, have been very blatant. They've been very outspoken about defending DEI.
Sister Andrew?
Question to the speaker.
Let the speaker yield.
Yes.
If the sale of rainbow branded merch is then funding corporate donations to politicians who make anti-LGBTQ policies, then isn't rainbow capitalism a net detriment to the LGBTQ? Here.
That is an excellent point. In response to that, I would say a lot of corporations generally, at least from my understanding, a lot of the Pride merch that is sold in the month of June, generally a portion of that is donated to charities as well, which I think has, ultimately this is a net detriment debate. There are definitely some negative aspects to rainbow capitalism, but I believe not at this time. Although there are some negative aspects of rainbow capitalism, as you mentioned, I'm sure a portion of those dollars are being donated to right-wing politicians. I feel that the money going to charities such as the Trevor Project, which has increased the visibility, which has helped thousands of LGBTQ youth, which has helped increase visibility for these youth, I think that counteracts the impacts of those donations. And I want to go back.
President, question for the speaker.
Not right now. And I want to go back to those DEI programs just for a second. Not just Costco, even corporations that have historically been associated with some unethical practices, like large banks such as Morgan Stanley, have come out in favor of really strong DEI policies, in favor of supporting their Pride events, in favor of supporting their LGBTQ employees. And ultimately, that is what rainbow capitalism is. Certainly, there are many unethical aspects of capitalism. There's the child labor these corporations are involved in. There's the environmental regulations these corporations disrespect. But when you talk about rainbow capitalism specifically, when you talk about their support for LGBTQ movements, those issues aren't directly related. Now, but I do want to say, you might be wondering, well, Brother Sarver, if nothing we've debated is rainbow capitalism, then aren't you just like picking and choosing? Aren't you throwing away everything that could be a detriment and just accepting what's good? And to that, I will say there is one serious point the affirmation has brought up directly related to rainbow capitalism. They talked about how it dehumanizes people, about how it lacks complexity, how it lacks historical understanding and nuances of LGBT culture. The examples about the Burger King bottom menu top buns, those are clearly disrespectful examples of rainbow capitalism that cause some harm to the LGBT community. However, we have to remember that there are hundreds of big corporations across the country that participate in these movements. And as Brother Westrick mentioned earlier, the vast majority of these Pride Month demonstrations, of the products that are being sold during Pride Month, they aren't necessarily like commentary on LGBTQ issues or the LGBTQ community. They aren't trying to define the community. They aren't trying to tell the community what they should believe in or how they should behave. They're very, in a sense, they are very simplistic representations that promote visibility. It's a bag with a rainbow on it. It's a water bottle with the word pride on it, which on the surface doesn't sound like a lot, but as Sister Waters mentioned, those simple demonstrations across thousands of stores across America, which impact millions of youth, have a really big positive impact when added up, which is why we want to get.
Recognition of alumni. Second. President Bush, second to
have one class at 20.
You're here.
Rainbow's white as it is all of the colors.
Right, the floor is open. Mr. President,
Sister President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni, and guests. Last year, I had the honor of creating Pride merch for one of my friends. I'd taken up bracelet making to prepare for my job as a summer camp counselor, and she asked if I could make her one with the lesbian pride flag colors. When it was completed, I handed it over, and she told me that this was actually the first piece of Pride merch that she'd ever owned. I was so honored to be able to contribute a piece of fabric that I had woven over the past few weeks that meant so much to her. Visibility of the LGBTQA+ community is important and it's meaningful, but corporations often ignore this importance to chase after sales. They ignore this deeper meaning in search of corporate profit. Sometimes these corporations actively donate to homophobic politicians, neglect their LGBTQA+ community and employees, and can perpetuate harmful stereotypes about these communities. But before I get into why rainbow capitalism is a net detriment to these communities, I'd like to acknowledge its groundbreaking roots. The government has historically supported the refusal of businesses to serve sexual and gender minorities, continuing up until 2 years ago and in the current day. In 2023, the Supreme Court ruled in Creative versus Ellenis that businesses could refuse to serve same-sex couples if it violated their religious beliefs. Rainbow capitalism started as a sincere response to many corporations' exile of this community by showing this community acceptance, promoting visibility, and contributing to activism. However, many corporations that now promote Pride only do so out of financial interest. Their lack of lasting support for the LGBTQ community consumers are clear by the visible pullback of Pride marketing in the past year. In 2024, a marketing professor who studies outreach of the LGBTQ communities at Georgia College and State University said, "I had expected some brand caution, but this year seems to be a near full-scale retreat." Target is limiting Pride sale merchandise to roughly half of its stores, and Nike won't be launching their Pride collection at all. This serves only to show how flimsy these corporations' support can be. Not only are these corporations inconsistent with their so-called support, but some, like Target, donate to causes intended to harm the LGBTQ community. For example, a $150,000 donation was made by Target to a Minnesota-based political group backing a candidate openly opposing gay rights. Additionally, rainbow capitalism attempts to substitute real support with commercial recognition. 64% of the community and allies believe that companies' efforts are mostly performative gestures rather than a meaningful commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mr. President, Sister Amy, question for the speaker. Please speak your yield.
I will.
Even if something is performative, can it still be helpful overall?
I think that things can be performative and helpful, such as the bracelet that I made for my friend, but they don't necessarily have to be contributing to sales of companies actively harming these communities to be both performative and helpful. It's the corporation aspect that's bringing this negative trait.
Will the speaker yield?
Not at this time. On top of that, less than 19% say that their workplace has inclusive bathroom policies, employee resource groups, or an affinity groups for transgender and non-binary individuals, gender-affirming beliefs, family planning benefits, or comprehensive transition support programs. Some of the most pressing issues that these communities are facing occur year-round, and their employees only seem to pay attention, and their employers only seem to pay attention during the month of June, when their struggle is able to be commoditized. 47% of the LGBTQ community has experienced workplace discrimination at some point in their lives, and 33% have left their jobs because of how their employer treated them. Rainbow capitalism has become another example of corporations placing products over people. It dismisses the roots of pride while also exposing these corporations for what they are: calculative, cost-conscious cowards. These corporations are scaling back their support as America continues down the dangerous road it's currently on. Now more than ever is the time for small businesses, charities, and activist groups to have their voices heard instead of being drowned out by corporations only looking to profit. While rainbow capitalism isn't all good or all bad, it's certainly impactful. Recently, that impact has shifted attention away from important issues concerning workplace discrimination and even contributed to homophobic policy making. It's not the product that counts, it's the meaning behind it and the people behind that meaning. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Student President.
Hello and good evening, students, alumni, guests, and community members. I am a current music education major at UGA, and I am a queer brown man. This afternoon, the Georgia State House of Representatives passed House Bill 267, the Riley Gaines Act, an anti-trans bill, which attacks trans kids in sports. This was passed by all Republicans and 3 Democrats. One of these Democrats was helped to be put in office by members of our community and the Human Rights Campaign in Georgia. I was in a group chat with someone and I got an argument with a cis-het man because he was defending those Democrats who voted against it, saying it was a tactical move and that this is an 80-20 issue. I was really angry that I had to leave after months of being in it because I felt betrayed along with the queer community by the people in the party that I aligned with, because I felt like my community was used for political gain and that those kind of people are okay throwing us under the bus like that. I also saw a post saying that the 2 CEOs of Paramount has resigned its DEI initiatives, and the co-CEOs are cisgender gay white men. Lots of other companies such as Target and Google has done the same thing. In fact, on Google Calendar, Pride Month, Black History Month, etc. have been removed since Trump and Republicans have attacked DEI initiatives. These companies will only show support for the queer community when it benefits them financially. At the same time, they are donating money to anti-queer politicians who are drafting, introducing, and passing legislation that harm us. Our community is not for profit. I am not for profit. These companies may be earning profit through rainbow capitalism, but that is not helping us. We are still being targeted and attacked for simply existing. Rainbow capitalism does not make all of us feel supported and safe because we are all still being treated as lesser human beings. Our pride parades should not be funded by companies that bite our backs. They should be organized by queer people who support each other. That is the essence of collective action for queer rights. Rainbow capitalism is not doing enough to help us. Issues of the queer community will not be resolved by slapping a rainbow on a logo or a piece of merchandise in June. We do not feel supported by two-faced companies. In fact, we feel betrayed. We need better and we deserve better. Thank you.
Madam President, members of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni, and fellow guests. We've heard all night what rainbow capitalism really means. But what does rainbow capitalism mean to people? What does it mean to the average person in the LGBTQ community? Rainbow capitalism simply describes the marketing of pride-related products to a target group of people. Rainbow capitalism is a teenager buying a small flag. Rainbow capitalism is that anxious teenager walking into a mainstream store with the feeling of a million eyes watching them. Rainbow capitalism is that teenager using every ounce of courage to proudly walk to the pride section of the store and purchase something that means something to them. Something that represents a fundamental part in themselves, one that they've had to hide from friends, family, and maybe even themselves. Now, let's replace that flag with acne medication, a plus-size t-shirt, makeup, depression, supplements, or merchandise from a nerdy or weird fandoms. All these products are made to help us feel better being who we are. They make us proud of ourselves and allow us to feel like we aren't the outcasts, like the okay, sorry, I was wrong. They make us proud of ourselves and allow us to feel like we aren't alone in whatever deviant group we may be a part of. We can all relate to feeling like the outcasts, like the downtrodden, like the undesirable, where we hide who we are and try to appease our peers. In particular, when members of the LGBTQ buy Pride products, they can feel proud of who they are. I personally am not a part of the LGBTQ community, but I can attest to feelings of being scared to show my true desires. Feeling alone and outcast in whatever you're hiding and bottling up is such a heavy feeling. But seeing an entire section of a store celebrating that part of yourself that you've hidden away makes you feel like you aren't alone. This feeling is the direct result of companies targeting. Yes.
So, learning how you say, see things that represent you to feel better, especially in the consumerism aspect. As a queer woman and having a sister who's there who actually tests rainbow products, isn't like targeting those corporations kind of reducing people to their stereotype with shirts with glitter and the big rainbow saying slay queen or a camera leader? So are we still acting in a detriment because of these stereotypes that is being perpetuated by those corporations?
I feel like as someone in a minority group, and they see something that may be like outlandish or outrageous or not exactly that really represents who they are being made by like a large corporation or this, they can, there's going to be some sort of product, something that you can relate to. Like one of the members already said they made a friendship bracelet for their friend. I mean, yes, that didn't come from a large corporation, but simply the product or the product itself can give meaning to something that is inherently greedy or capitalistic. This feeling is the direct result of companies targeting certain groups of people to market towards and make products for. When looking at whether a method of marketing and consumerism is dangerous for consumers, we must look at the impact. The products have on said consumers. Considering that the only tangible downside of someone buying something to represent themselves is monetary loss, even when looking at rainbow capitalism in the lens of some billionaire sitting up on his golden throne on Wall Street, by his company deciding to simply promote the LGBTQ community only to make use of the Pride Month for their own monetary gain, the consumer isn't being exploited. Maybe the company itself may not value the movement or message behind whatever they may be selling. It doesn't change the impact on the consumer. Let's say I've created I Hate Andrew LLC, and I want to make the most money off that loser Andrew. I'm going to go all out around his birthday and send specific marketing to his friends and family to buy my Andrew-themed birthday party supplies, like Andrew cakes or Andrew t-shirts or Andrew balloons. And Andrew and his friends and family are going to buy all of it up, and I'm going to make hand over fist on Andrew's birthday. When my friends and family buy that birthday gear to celebrate another year of my life, they won't be thinking about how the I Hate Andrew company only made this to make money off of them, because the realization that anyone can make about capitalism in general is that yes, companies only produce products to make money. If a group isn't a nonprofit organization that is selling things for fundraising, then yes, they're only making money, making the product to make money. Not at this moment. When you buy cereal from the store, do you cynically think to yourself, wow, the multi-billion-dollar company General Mills doesn't really care about me, my thoughts, or me as a person at all. It doesn't really support my love for cereal. The answer is hopefully no, because if you think yes, then you may have more problems than the issues of capitalism. However, my point in that analogy is that the intentions or apathy of a producer won't affect the impact the product has on the consumer. I yield the floor.
President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni, and guests. What do garlic bread, black rings, and dragons all have in common? Here. Got your answers locked in? Great. It's because these are all unofficial symbols of the asexual community. Asexuality, for those of you who might be a little confused, is an LGBTQ identity relating to those who experience little to no sexual attraction. And these aren't just random objects. There's a well-documented asexual sentiment that eating garlic bread is always preferable to having sex. A black ring worn on one's hand might symbolize that identity to others in the community. And as for the dragons, many people dispute the very existence of asexual individuals who have lovingly compared themselves to the fictional creatures. Now, I've seen products that integrate these icons, these symbols, but I've seen them at small, queer-owned businesses, not at Target or Starbucks, because these big corporations who participate in rainbow capitalism are not representative of the whole community. They can't be. They have no skin in the game, and to give them any praise for progress is laughable. Tonight, the negation has made an argument that I found almost laughable, and that is that we can separate rainbow capitalism from capitalism as a whole. It's impossible. Yes, that is exactly what multiple speakers have done, is they've said, well, we can't take rainbow capitalism. A lot of the problems that you have with that are just problems that you have with capitalism. Yes, because they are intertwined. They are taking your gay money and using it to donate to politicians who are actively harming LGBTQ individuals. But hey, you don't have to take it from me. You can take it from queer rights activist Stuart Hall, who says that degradation of the political produces a situation in which the issues fragment, disengage, dissipate. The general discontent becomes sectional discontents, and they are by their nature conservative in temper, and that they seek to advance one section against another within the model of the scramble, the affluent free-for-all. Now, what does that mean? Several speakers on both sides have asserted tonight that marginalized communities, their struggles overlap and are connected. They are not only inextricably bound, but inherently political. If you are part of a marginalized group, you have a political identity because there are people who are out there trying to take your rights away. But we don't want to let it. However, when an identity ceases to become political and starts to become commercial, that's when these things that the queer community has tried to do starts to become less effective.
Mr. President, question for the speaker.
Yes.
Why does the commercialization of that identity take away from its political meaning?
Because it doesn't have the same level of complexity. As many people have asserted tonight, a shirt that says slay on it does not properly represent years and years of battles that queer people have fought to keep their rights, to gain new ones that they haven't been able to express before. It's simply not the same. And we've been talking about visibility all evening, visibility, and what companies who participate in rainbow capitalism can do for visibility. And if you want to talk about sending a message, you should think about what happens when you give someone support and then walk it back. Because as so many speakers have illustrated tonight, that has been a very prominent thing happening among corporations, especially as we're moving into the Trump administration, because they don't have a dog in this fight. They can cast LGBTQ people aside with pretty much no detriment to their own success. Yes, queer people have buying power, but that doesn't mean that they are going to prioritize us over people, over like the general population.
Question for the speaker. The speaker,
Yes.
So, let's say like a company like Costco who has cafeteria programs, or maybe Ben and Jerry's that has openly still supported, Pride parades and has actively donated to charities. And instead of let's say a politician that doesn't support it, what do you say that instead of being a net detriment can be a net positive thing?
And as I said, it's a beautiful sentiment, but I fear that these companies who are actually stating true to these beliefs are in the minority. Most companies will cast aside their morals at the first sign of trouble. And I'd like to end with a little story. A month ago, after Target rolled back its support for the LGBTQ community, the Minneapolis Pride Parade refused any and all donations from Target. Instead, they turned to crowdfunding. They turned to their community. And within 24 hours, they surpassed their $50,000 donation goal. We have a community that is strong and vibrant. And I think that tonight we need to give credit where credit is due. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Motion to question.
Second. There's been a motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, we're calling it. Will the clerk please reread the resolution?
Be hereby resolved, Rainbow Capitalism is a net detriment to the LGBTQ community.
Is there any need for clarification? The chair will look favorably upon a motion for a roll call vote.
Second.
There's been a motion second for a roll call vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Will the clerk now call roll?
Brother Allison?
Aye.
Sister Andrew?
Aye.
Sister Bland?
Aye.
Brother Briggs?
Aye.
Brother Crane?
Nay.
Sister Garcia?
Aye.
Sister Giuliano?
Aye.
Sister Harris?
Aye.
Brother Harrison?
Next.
Brother Icard? Brother Johnson?
Aye.
Sister Leoy?
Aye.
Sister Orlette?
Aye.
Brother Sister Paris?
Aye.
Brother Roberts?
Nay.
Sister Russell?
Aye.
Sister Shaken?
Aye.
Sister Tipton?
No.
Sister Waters?
No.
Brother Westrick? Brother Yother?
Aye.
All right, with a vote of 15 ayes to 6 nays, the resolution passes among actives. Motion for Kardashian mindset. Second. There's been a motion and a second to pull the Kardashian mindset. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Nay. Nay. You guys have it. All right. Yes, this means you. Much like the Kardashian mindset, we care about your opinion, but just not quite as much. But if you are a guest who wishes to vote in favor of this resolution, please stand. Here. Here. All right, you guys can have a seat. If you're a guest opposed to this resolution, please stand.
Here.
Are there any abstentions? Okay. All right, with a vote of 11 ayes to 1 nay, the resolution also passes on guests. We will now hear our critics report.
Sister President.
Brother Briggs.
Ma'am. Sister President, siblings of the Phi Kappa Literary Society, alumni, and guests. Really happy. I thought that this was a pretty good debate. I'm your critic for tonight. For those of you who don't know what a critic's report is, I'll be giving the high and lows of all of our active siblings' speeches. If you're a guest, please see me at Little Italy's because this is a privilege of siblings in this society. I would like to say that I thought this debate was really good. I thought it reminded me a lot of the City Girls' last album in that it was a really good debate, but I would have done things a lot differently. The thing that I would have done differently is a lot more rebuttals. I felt like we had so many constructives. I was like drowning in statistics and like quotes and like pre-written stuff, and it was all very wonderful on its own. It would all look wonderful in the Orator or literary magazine, but I wanted somebody to get passionate, and I wanted somebody to tell me what to think and to boil down and like hand me the clash of the debate and where we should have gone, how I should have voted at the very end. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my voice, so worst comes to worst, I'll get up in front of you and whisper really loudly. Sister Bussa, wonderful first AF. It's been so long since I've seen you give like a constructive on the floor or like a first AF. It was brilliant. I was wondering how long it was going to take somebody to give me like the Subaru anecdote. It was my favorite thing ever that was like the first thing that happened. I felt like you just took my hand and you just ran with me the whole time. I thought you were a wonderful storyteller. You had a really good way of transitioning to the resolution with like a question at the beginning. And you had a really good point about how rainbow capitalism sterilizes the queer liberation movement. At the very end, you asked us if the queer community was worse off, or you said that the queer community was worse off today than 20 years ago. I didn't think that was the strongest point, but that was my biggest critique for you, I thought. So all in all, very good speech. Brother Roberts, wonderful first neg. I feel like you're up here just like knocking them out of the park here with like your Phi Kappa firsts. You've been on like a mad dash with it, and that's awesome. You had me hooked from the very beginning with your question about invisibility. I thought your intro was really good and how you related it to your identity as a Black man. However, I think a good intro is no more than a minute in length. After that, I want some content. I want you to be boiling it down for me. You had a really good data about LGBT people feeling invisible. I like your style as a storyteller. I feel like you're defining that for yourself very early, and that's wonderful. And then you got into the clash really early on about how does rainbow capitalism make queer culture a part of U.S. culture, or does it just give us like Judy shirts and stuff like that? You addressed that. And you mentioned that how just because it's imperfect doesn't mean it's a net detriment. I wish you would have balanced that a little more too, given us a little more nuance on that. Miss Guest, please see me at Little Italy's. Sister Waters, I thought you had a wonderful speech. Every time you get up here, you just get even better about moving away from the lectern, and I hope you know that we see that and you think you're doing a wonderful job. You had a good point about just how one sign of support reduces risk of suicidality among queer young people. Thought that was really good. I feel like you were giving us the Arthur fist for a little bit. For those of you who don't know, the meme with like Arthur where he's like ticked off and he's like doing this. I would have liked you to gesticulate a little more. You had a good job tying your intro like all the way through to the middle and to the end of your speech. And then when somebody questioned you about visibility opening people up to hate, you said that support for the LGBT people isn't going anywhere. But I felt like other speakers did a good job at demonstrating how it has dried up, I thought. Sister Tipton, wonderful speech. You addressed the Next Benedict news story wonderfully. I thought that it demonstrated how thorough your research was and being able to with grace too, which is a really hard thing to do, so thank you for doing that. You had a really good statistic about how 1/5 of hate crimes are on the basis of gender identity or sexuality. I wish that you brought up at how this point in the political climate, the Justice Department has stopped tracking like hate crime data on basis of gender and sexuality because of our current president. I thought that would have been a good point, but that's just sort of my meandering. You had an interesting point about change taking finance. I loved how you talked about how a movement that was originally started in protest has been going complacent for the sake of consumption. And then I wish that you had struck just a little more at the inherency of rainbow capitalism being bad for queer people. But you got good and passionate at the end. I like that. I wish you eased us a little bit more into it, like more of a crescendo than like abrupt. But I thought it was very good. Sister Orlette, I liked your speech. I thought that when I wish you'd be a little more intentional with your motion. I saw you sort of walk back and forth behind the lectern while looking down at it. I wish you'd sort of moved this way, that way. You were really good at bringing us into the burden. You talked about how 2/3 of people support LGBT people. I wanted you to address maybe why this is reflecting on the corporations, or why corporations aren't reflecting that necessarily. You had a point about how Rainbow Capitalism makes pride accessible. I thought that the AF had done a good job of setting up pride as originally a protest and how protests are accessible. All in all, really good speech. I thought you had a good intro. I would just say, don't talk over when someone is asking you a question, because all that drowns out to me. And just be mindful of your time. Brother Westrick, I said, thank you for waiting for the gallery to quiet down. I thought you were very loud in your intro, and that isn't necessarily the best way to get my attention. I thought that the substance of your intro alone was enough to get my attention without being very loud. I liked how you talked about companies reinforcing social norms and not necessarily setting them themselves. I thought that was a good point. And how Rainbow Capitalism led to social legitimacy. You said how Rainbow Capitalism highlights LGBT issues, but I thought that the AF did a good job of saying that Rainbow Capitalism highlights queer people as consumers and not their actual issues. At this point in the debate, I was really begging for a rebuttal. We have two more guests. See me at Little Italy's. Another guest. See me at Little Italy's. Brother Saravana Kamar. Did you think we went up with no notes again? Oh, really? That's you? Okay, I thought it was wonderful. I wrote oh my God, did you come up here with no notes? I was really impressed. You didn't reference them very often, which I thought was really impressive. I wish I could do that. I thought your movement was good. Wait. You talked, I bought your point about how the AF had talked about donations a lot and that not being a part of Rainbow Capitalism until Sister Andrew asked her question. Maybe next time, take less questions, I would say, because I thought that you did a good job of selling me on that. You talked about Costco defending DEI initiatives, but didn't tie that into Rainbow Capitalism specifically. So I would say try to link all of your examples in there with a more inherent thread next time. And then I thought you did a good job of reframing the debate about how the AF tiptoed around the burden a little bit. Sister Giuliano, I liked your point about Rainbow Capitalism leading corporations to ignore the importance of visibility over profits. You did a really good job of weighing pros and cons. I thought you gave us the right amount of nuance while still backing your side. And then you tied it back into how Rainbow Capitalism support is only conditional. I wish you had gotten a little bit more into why conditional support specifically is bad. And you talked about how it replaced real support with performance, basically, and I loved your alliteration at the end of your speech. Favorite literary device. I thought that was a good way to tie my attention into the end and give me something to really believe in. At this point, I was like, oh my God, somebody please give me a rebuttal. My piece of advice to all siblings would be, please don't be afraid to scrap a constructive in favor of whatever you think might be a bad rebuttal. I would rather have a debate that or speeches that address the clash of the debate than just another constructive with more stats. And then Sister Shaken, thank you for giving us what I thought was a pretty solid rebuttal. Your intro was funny. You made a good point about how Rainbow Capitalism was not representative of the community. Can't separate Rainbow Capitalism and capitalism. That was a really good point that the neg tried to dance around. Your quote, I thought it was a good quote. I thought it might have been good in a constructive, but at this point, I didn't want to hear another pre-written thing for the rest of the debate. I wish you'd instead paraphrased the quote and sort of explained the significance of it then. I liked, and then finally, I liked your point about how when identity is commercialized as opposed to politicized, it loses its power. Yes, and that is all I have. Thank you very much. My last piece of advice would be don't be afraid of rebuttals, everyone. Please and thank you. I yield the floor.